Hey class. All right, so some tips here on how to succeed in the independent study unit. The independent part, aside from your own ideas in the paragraphs, it's also the fact that you're really going to have to shift through information on your own to find what's important. Okay, so we've got our overview of how the overall idea is: could a trade agreement that increases trade between North America and Central America, with each Central American country specializing more in the product that they already have the highest, exports of, that they already produce the most, would that help with migration issues and give more choices for people in Central America about whether they want to stay home or move to another country? It's not like a forced situation where it's only push factors and there's no pull factors in Central America if we go to our terms from the migration unit. All right, so the grading overview, however much you put in will determine what grade you get. Remember, if you want the full marks, examples of an APA citation, okay, are here. You'll put your information later. That's like the last step, is the APA citations. For a big project, you need to do things step by step. So just getting information into the chart, that's your first step. Making sure you got your sources somewhere handy, that's your second step. Drafting the paragraphs and the drawing for a map, that's your third step. Then your fourth would be getting those sources you saved and turning them into footnotes if you really want to grade in the high 80s or the 90s. A mark around 75 for an ISU on most course syllabi, plural for syllabus, most courses in high school. If the ISU or the final project, if you're at 75 or so, it means your grade going into it will not go down. And if you're fine with a 75, maybe you don't need to do the footnotes, but we're inviting you to do footnotes because they're helpful. You're going to have to do them later in high school, and it's a good skill to start having now. All right, so I gave you key search terms in the announcement yesterday, and I'm going to just show you how these searches work and how it encourages you to develop the skill of how to actually use the internet, because you'll see how the AI potential answer that most search engines use now, on various detailed searches, the AI answer is not very helpful. All right, so let's go to Guatemala, top export, and dollar value. If you find a top export for any country, a good source will tell you the dollar value. Currently, international currency is still based on the American dollar, so it's US dollars, okay? And then every other country kind of like compares their currency to the American currency. All right, so you see here the AI overview, even before I point out the footnote they have, it just says top exports include a variety of agricultural products and apparel. That doesn't tell you much. And then they say key exports include coffee, bananas, sugar, apparel, both knitted and crotcheted, edible fruits and nuts. Well, which one of those is the top one? Because that's what we're looking for. And then if you go to that footnote, it gives you, let's see if it comes up. Yeah, a whole bunch of different sources for already general information. Sometimes you get a more specific one if you go onto a specific thing, but it's still just not as efficient for you as learning how to have specific search terms. We already have a specific search term, Guatemala top export, and then you review the first 10 results at least, if not 20 results. Okay, and by doing that, you'll see what I've already clicked on, because some sources were not terribly useful. So after looking at the first 10 sources, I found that it was the World Bank, which is key on international trade, and Trading Economics, and one other site that actually had valid info. So then I go to those, okay? Once you've looked through the top 10 results for a specific search, you'll have better info. And now, this is Daniel Workman, same guy who had the info I used in the example in the assignment for El Salvador. He appears to be a leading researcher on international trade. So he got a bit more specific. He said fruits and nuts. That's still, we can probably do better. So it's the World Bank, I believe. Yep. World Bank gives you 2022. That's totally fine. If I see that you're making an effort, any source within the last 5 years, and it gives you a real specific thing with a real number for dollar value, that's good. Just use it, you'll be fine. So 2022, the top export is specifically coffee. And that's helpful because you'll find some of these other countries also do fruits and nuts and clothing. So if we're actually doing a trade agreement where each country is encouraged to specialize more, making Guatemala the go-to for coffee could be a real win-win. So we say coffee, we can round up the number. So the number rounds up to 1.2 billion. So we will say coffee at $1.2 billion. All right. And now let's see, even before we go to what the North American nations import for that specific good, we could do the top export chart pretty quickly. By once we have one thing, we just remember to take a note of our source. And this is something you're going to do throughout high school. You're going to copy the URL, and just in your rough working draft, you won't really worry about formatting. That's for the final copy. You know that's your source and that you can come back to it later to click on that, get your information for a footnote, and then get rid of the URL, and you have your formatting, nice and pretty. So let's now do the same thing for Belize. We can go back to the same search page, whether it's Bing or Yahoo or Google, the same search page, you'll pretty much just switch out one key phrase, okay? So, got a sleepy computer here. It's having a slow time. We'll keep this in. If this has to be a part one, and part one is all of us just getting our top exports down, that is totally fine. Okay, so while this figures itself out, I'll tell you on your main page where you had your top 10 results for a very clear and specific search term, you can then just switch out Guatemala for Belize or Nicaragua or Panama, one of the other countries, okay? And that should give you your top 10 sites, 2 or 3 of which will be accurate. Okay, so let's see. Am I getting they call this Murphy's Law, students, where anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And I don't mind keeping this in the video so you all learn that it takes a few tries to get things right. All right, so let's see if we can now exit. There we go. Now we're on track. So you see, instead of saying, oh no, the technology won't work, I guess this can't be done, you wait a minute and then you try again. Waiting a minute and trying again will solve most of your problems in high school. All right, so let's get rid of all of this. They just decided to change the country name into a bunch of coding. All right, so Guatemala, top export, we got that. Now, Belize, top export. Again, so this time AI is being more specific, and it's according to Statista. Maybe you'll make that your source, or export Alberta. Turns out our western neighbors in Alberta are really into trade, so they keep good records on this. Raw cane sugar could be it, but I'm still going to look at the top 10, okay? And even in the top 10, you'll notice World Bank, World's Top Exports, Trading Economics, and the Observatory of Economic Complexity are all good. And then even Wikipedia, I'll show you a trick on Wikipedia. The difference between a good Wikipedia page and a bad Wikipedia page is whether they have the very thing that we're training you to do in geography. Okay, so right here, yep, they've got a bunch of footnotes and references of legitimate sources for the information. That's what we're training you to do in this very assignment. If you want your 90+ mark on the ISU, you're going to have footnotes. And the Economy of Belize page does have footnotes. So let's see. Another trick here for once you know it's a good page, if you want to get to your information quicker, Control F. We'll put in the word export. Okay, and it says cane sugar became principal export, but does that have a good footnote? If it doesn't have a good footnote, we're not going to use that bit. So let's go through each use of the word. All right. Yeah, and see, this is already a sign that this is kind of a weaker Wikipedia page because they have references, but they're not using footnotes to tell you specifically which fact comes from which specific source. And that's an academic standard. So this is actually a weaker Wikipedia page, which means I'll go back to, of the top 5 that have quality sources, the one I've mentioned in the announcements, Economic Complexity Observatory, we'll use them. And Belize, yep, it's telling you that their top export was raw sugar, and it's only 105 million. This tells you about some of the wealth inequality in our world whenever countries export goods to the billions, and then like 10% of that is what another country is able to generate. So Belize might benefit from this idea, but maybe they won't, and you'll look into that. But we know now that cane sugar, okay, we'll get this website URL for future reference when we want to do an APA footnote. But right now we're going to write cane sugar at, and if we're going in billions, we can say 0.105 billion. Okay, and we'll keep, again, that URL to come back to later for when we want to do footnotes. All right, right here, you'll see how I gave you the example of how if you click references and then click insert footnote, that's how you get what you see here with a number after the info on El Salvador going to a number here with the source in APA. Same thing for how much Canada imports. Okay, so there's your demonstration on how you can find top export for each country. Now, the only other search term you need, because again, 2 search terms, if you replace key phrases, it gives you what you need for the chart. So if we're looking for Canadian imports, let's see, by typing in Canada, or say Canadian imports, raw cane sugar dollar value. Okay. And let's see, this time AI is being a bit more specific. What's the source they give us if we go to that footnote? It's giving us World Integrated Trade Solutions, okay. Apparently we import about 763 million, so that's 0.763 billion. Again, top 5 to 10 sources, Tridge, World Bank, Canadian Sugar Institute. Let's see if that's a unique source. And let's go to trading economics now. Again, there's like 5 or 6 really good sources that most searches will bring up. And if you rotate them, that's good. Canadian Sugar Institute, does it give us? All right, tells us that we produce our own sugar to the tune of 1.4 million tons. And this is already worth $1.75 billion. So that will connect to one of the other questions. Who might oppose the idea of us getting more sugar from Belize to help them out? Maybe it's the Canadian producers who already make this. Okay. And this is mainly about the internal Canadian sugar industry. So yeah, we're not really going to use that as our source. Instead, we'll go here, Canadian imports just from Brazil, not in general. Okay, so let's see. The sentence below the link often tells you, all right, so Observatory of Economic Complexity does give us this specific number of let's go to it. It's loading. All right, so it says raw sugar in Canada, what we make in it and what we export. And it's saying 1.14 billion, even though another source from a few years ago said $763 million, which is 0.763 billion. So we're going to take Observatory of Economic Complexity. It's newer, okay? It's a newer source. It's more up to date. It has more research going on, okay? So and it's, again, that was 2024. And the other statistic, let's see if it even tells us. There you go, 2023. So again, if you use the 2023 number from World Integrated Trade Solution, that's good enough for our project. If you have the number and a source, great. Ideally, you'll find the 2024 number. We really increased our sugar consumption, you'll see here, and it's 1.14 billion. Okay, so I'll take this as our link for future reference. All right, let me just lean the phone back here. All right, got the link. I know it's 1.14 billion. That takes us here. No, not Guatemala. Got to get it to the right one. It's Canada's import of that. All right, so 1.14 billion US dollars. And we'll put in the source here for future clicking and converting that into a footnote. All right, so country top export gives you all you need for the left-hand column here. And then you just switch out the country and you look through again, top 5 to 10 search results. You find the best source, the most up-to-date and well-researched. And then you take it and you put the info down, you get your source down. As I say, I'm not going to be picky about the year or the exact accuracy. If you're getting good information and showing a source, that's the point of this activity. It shows your independent research skills and that you can go through some search results and do some thinking, independent thinking for yourself. That's why it's called Independent Study Unit. It's not the Ask AI to answer the question unit. It's look through information, use your own thinking skills to find the best answer. Okay, so that's for top export. But yeah, for top imports of the same product for Canada, US, and Mexico, basically, the search term can be changed up. So we could change it up. So we say American imports raw cane sugar, dollar value. Okay. And again, you got a 2023 answer from World Integrated Trade Solution, but World Bank and Observatory of Economic Complexity and Trading Economics, they can give you specific numbers for 2024. And even if you want to see if more specific helps or not, you can write in 2024, since we're in 2025 now. Okay? And yeah, AI tells you it can't really figure that out from the US government reports, and that's why a general search will go to 2023. But again, you've got Observatory of Economic Complexity, World's Top Exports. You do have a couple sources that will give you that specific information. Okay, now if we want it for Mexico, let's just go. One second. Yep, same thing. Mexican imports raw cane sugar, dollar value. Same thing, you just put in Mexico or Mexican. Okay, Tridge, what is the AI source? I remember just at the end of any AI sentence, there's a footnote, you click on it. That source is again, well, there's two good sources now. What I've pointed out several times, the Observatory of Economic Complexity, and also World Integrated Trade Solution, okay? So again, the top 5 reliable sources you can rotate. They'll give you a number, and then you take the URL so you'll have it for future. Once you're done filling out the chart and done writing some paragraphs, then you can, if you want the extra marks, turn that URL into an APA footnote, okay, as the instructions tell you. All right, and then since I know one of the other countries does bananas, that's the only thing that you would change for North American imports is for each country, we'd say of bananas. All right, so whereas for filling out the top export column on the left of the chart, it's just same search and you switch the country's name. When it comes to imports, you got to switch the product name and then the 3 countries. Okay, so Mexico, Canada, America. And again, a reason to not just go straight to AI. I asked for Mexican imports. AI told me what Canada imported from Mexico, not what we asked for. So that's why we got to go. Bananas in Mexico, price for fresh bananas in Mexico, trading economics, Statista. All right, world's top exports, you'll notice, is a really good source. Is on par with the Observatory of Economic Complexity or the World Bank for good sources on trade. All right, so one search, you just switch out the country name. The other search, you switch out one of 3 North American countries and the product. And that will give you numbers to work with, okay, to practice your research skills. Then when it comes to the paragraph questions, okay, what would need to be specified in a trade agreement for the money from sales of the top export of any country to go towards activities that raise quality of life? Some of you figured this out quickly. Some of you aren't sure. So I'm going to give you the tip that any economic process, anything that gets produced and sold through those steps that we learned about in Unit 3, I believe it was, Unit 3 for industry and natural resources in the economy. There's basically 4 components to the production and sale. There's the labor, the people working to get it produced, extracted, refined, produced, transportation and logistics, so moving it and storing it. That's the second component. Then there's selling it in the other places where you want to sell the good. And then there's what they call management, a mixture of the people who organize the workers and manage them and the people who provide the technology, okay, what they call capital. The stuff to get, minerals out of the ground, the machines that grind coffee beans into coffee. I'm saying dust or powder. I know there's a much better word for it, but that's another example, okay? The machines that package food for you, okay? That's the 4th thing. There's labor, okay? There's transportation, there's sales, and there's management. So which of those 4 things, if we wanted countries that have some very rough regions with serious poverty and violence, if we wanted them to improve, which of those 4 would we actually want more of the money going into? A safe bet is if you can explain why workers' wages need to be higher than the cost of living, you would basically be answering this question. And maybe you actually think that, if this involves multiple countries, it actually has to be the supply chain, the transportation that gets more of the money from each sale of a t-shirt or a banana or a cup of coffee. And you would argue for that if you want to go that far. But if you're hoping to just get the basics out of this and, move on, then of those 4 things, management, labor, and transportation and sales, because when you think about the t-shirts from Central America, it's, companies like Amazon and Gap and Old Navy that sell them. Okay, if all the money goes to companies whose headquarters are in Canada or America, have you really helped people in Central America that you're trying to give a better shot at a good life to? Okay, so it's probably labor, but it could be transportation. It could be saying, hey, if we gave them more technology in the trade agreement, they could produce most of their own stuff. We could produce most of our own stuff. If everybody had access to good farm equipment, good mining equipment, effective computers, programs on knowing how to use these things properly, maybe that's your answer. But either way, between labor, management, sales, and transportation, your topic sentence would be of the major parts of an economic supply chain that we learned about in geography, comma, this new trade agreement would have to specify that most of the money from sales goes towards labor and we raise workers' wages. Okay, there's a shorter way to say that, but that's where you use your own independent thinking. Okay, between workers and their wages, transportation costs, which is a mixture of workers and technology, sales, again, workers and technology, but in a different location, or management, people organizing it, people providing technology. Where should most of the money go to? Is it 25% of each sale goes to each of those? Or is it 50% to one or the other? That's what you're answering here. What sort of opposition to this proposal could arise in Canada and America? And what could be done to persuade those who are opposed? That's where you could just do a specific example. The t-shirt producers of Canada would not like it if we got all of our t-shirts from El Salvador and boosted all of that so that super cheap t-shirts from El Salvador, we're putting them out of business. Would we try to still promote Canadian t-shirts, or would we tell those Canadian t-shirt producers, oh, hey, here's a thing similar to t-shirts that you can make that doesn't interfere with an effort to really help a poorer country get to the same quality of life as us? That's what you would talk about here. And then the other two, everybody, very straightforward. Where would you put a train line and a highway if you wanted to connect Canada through America and Mexico to these Central American countries? Which provinces and states would you put it in? What are the landforms like? Why would you think that's the best supply chain? And then draw a map. Okay? So hopefully, a bit of a longer clip, but really want to convey to you guys how the point of this is to develop your research skills. Okay? Do this very step by step. Just information first, paragraphs second. Information first, recording your sources second, and that can just be quick website URLs. Writing your paragraphs third, and then fourth, if you want the very high mark, you remove these links and you convert them into footnotes where it's an APA source for each thing that gave you your information. Okay, that's one thing I'm getting across to you. Other thing is how it's one search term, country name plus top export. Look through the top 10 results to develop your own independent research skills. That fills out one column. Then another search result, Canada or America or Mexico, imports of same product in the same line, dollar value. Okay, so one search for the country and the product will change, but that fills out the rest. And then it's saying from the sales of these products, knowing that we have, I'll say it again, labor, the workers, transportation, sometimes called logistics, moving a product and storing it, sales on the other end in a different country or a different region, and management, people organizing and people providing technology, maybe providing money, the first little bit of investment. Between those four things, workers, transportation, sales, management, which one should get most of the sale value if we want those countries to become more stable and if we want positive, peaceful, legal economies to become so attractive that there's less pressure to get involved with the illegal economies that currently affect that region of the world. All right? You pick one thing that should get most money and you say workers' wages or transportation costs or sales teams or managers with technology. Any of those four should get most of the money from the trade deal for 3 reasons. Give your 3 reasons, conclusion, you've got a great paragraph there. Okay? Very specifically, depending on which product, maybe it's Canadian t-shirt producers, maybe it's American fruit producers. So would oppose this because cheaper goods from these other countries would hurt their business. And there's a way, and I would address this by saying what? Is it, we'll find ways to encourage people to buy local anyway, or would you tell these producers to shift their production a bit for the sake of having resources go to these poorer countries and solving a bigger problem? Can you explain that? Those are the 2 paragraphs. And then propose verbally in a paragraph where you would put a train line and a highway to connect all these countries, and then just draw it out. Simple map of North America and Central America. Draw a line for your trains, your train line and your highway. Extra marks if you can put in natural features that show us where the Rockies are, where the plains are, where the Appalachian Hill regions are, what the equivalents are for Central America when it comes to mountains and plains. All right. You're all doing good? Go in order. You should be fine doing this today and tomorrow. As you know, I'm fine with extensions, but just send me a draft and that will help in your process. All right? We'll stay in touch.